Hi everybody, I'm your hot with Scott Kellner, and you are tuned in to Digital Mentorship. Digital Mentorship is a podcast designed to educate college, juniors, seniors, and current professionals about career possibilities. If you can think about what you wanted to do when you were declaring a major or getting ready to graduate, is that anything close to what you ended up doing? Do you think somebody else getting ready to graduate has any idea that a job or career or your business even exists? The goal of this podcast is to help narrow the gap between what individuals think their career must be and what it could be. Disclaimer time. Scott Kellner works in the private wealth management industry, and it's possible investments or securities are talked about in this podcast. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice.
Was the summer of the fall. I heard the gods of chaos call.
Hello and welcome to Digital Mentorship podcast, where we're helping close the gap between what you think your career has to be and what it could be. I'm your hot with Scott Kellner, and today I'm super excited to have one of my good friends, Curtis Roberts, on the show. Curtis and I went to lacrosse together, played lacrosse together. Went to Westminster together, played lacrosse together. Curtis is currently the founder of the Founders Attorney, which is his company, which we're going to get into. He's also spent time, you spent time at Realty Mogul. You were an associate at Dowling Aaron Incorporated. I know you worked for the SEC and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. You're an adjunct professor doing business law, right, and corporate law. Contract and business organizations is what it says on your LinkedIn page. And yeah, like I said, you've been an attorney at the Founders Attorney for 4 years and 2 months. So Curtis, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And so I guess, one of the things that I like to do, to start off the show, I play with my guests to help my listeners know you a little better, and to help me know you a little better is play two truths and a lie. And so the three things that you gave me is you rode an ostrich, you've been bungee jumping, and you've caught 100+ pound halibut. I think I know you rode an ostrich because I've heard that story, I think. And I don't know if you've been bungee jumping. I think bungee jumping is the lie.
Oh, you got it. Yep.
I got it.
And I should have, when I was living in Uganda working for their version of the Securities and Exchange Commission, I should have gone bungee jumping, but I didn't. Things weren't really up to safety standards and codes, and I decided to pass on it. But in hindsight, I should have done it.
You should have done it. Well, I've never done any extreme sport like that, other than, like skiing is about as extreme as I get, dude. I'm kind of a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I'm kind of scared if I start getting into that stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It might.
Ostrich riding though, don't recommend it. One time, I was a one and done. Yeah, I don't think.
But I think I've seen the pictures from it. That was like.
Yeah, the pictures are the best part. It looks like I'm having much more fun than I was actually having.
Thank you so much for being here. So yeah, the idea of the whole podcast is this is something that's geared towards, sophomores, juniors, seniors, people that are making decisions about what they want to do for career, what they want to do, what they want to study. And kind of, like I said at the beginning, trying to close the gap between what people think their career has to be and what their career can be or could be. And I think your experience is super interesting in terms of going to law school and starting your own kind of like law firm with a very specific niche and focus, and we can kind of get to that. But one of the other things that I really like about your experience is all the traveling that you've done. But I kind of first wanted to start at how you ended up at Westminster and why you chose finance as a major.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to Westminster, grew up in Idaho, grew up in a really small town, about 9,000 people. Moved with my parents up to Boise when I was around 12, and then finished my middle school and high school there. I visited Westminster College and kind of just fell in love with it. That's where we met, and it's just absolutely incredible experience for me. What was the second part?
Oh, just and how you ended up deciding to study finance.
Oh, okay. So I started in at choosing a management major. I thought I wanted to be a history major in when I was in high school, and then I realized it's really tricky to make money as a history major with a business minor. So I decided to make the business my major, and then I started out with a in the management. When I declared my major, it was a management student. I realized pretty quickly that if you search on Monster or Indeed, there's not a lot of jobs in management for 22-year-old kids coming out of undergrad. So I switched it to, I didn't want to be an accountant, so I switched it to finance. I had a great teacher, Lauren LeRae. I think she also had an impact on you. And after my first year, I switched majors to finance, and it was the best program that I did.
And I think, yeah, Lauren LeRae was one of my favorite professors. She did my intro to finance class. I was originally an economics major, but around that time that I did an intro to finance class, I think I did pretty well in it. It's actually one of my blog posts. I talk about, how my grandfather had given me a book by Michael Lewis, originally like The Big Short, and that all kind of happened for me around the same time, and where I felt like I kind of was learning to love learning, and finance was one of those things that I was passionate about. And it all kind of just fell on line, which I think is one of the great things about Westminster is Harrison and I, who I've had on the show earlier, was talking about the same thing. He felt like he learned to love learning at Westminster, and he talked about the small class sizes and the professors having an impact on him. So I think that's something really special. And we all play lacrosse, so wow, we have all have a bunch of stuff in common. And then after your time, at Westminster, you decided at some point that you were going to go to law school. And just tell me about that, that decision, and kind of, I think you had an experience as an intern at Goldman Sachs, and then you made the decision to go to law school, or just talk about that.
So I've been thinking about and kind of planning on going to law school after undergrad. I graduated in 3 years, and so give me a little bit less time to kind of make the decisions about what to do after. My brother-in-law at the time, he was in law school, and so he kind of had counseled me on how to get letters of recommendation, what that path looks like. He'd given me all his old LSAT study textbooks, so it was one that I went down that path in studying and taking the LSAT. You actually got me a position at venturecapital.org. We worked there together.
Yeah.
I volunteered. And then I unfortunately had to give that one up. I actually got a job at Goldman, so I was working there.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't an internship. It was full time.
Yeah. So it was my first interview out of undergrad. Actually, I tell the story all the time. Is that somebody had come into one of the finance classes, and he was actually at Goldman. He said, if you have an interview, you're going to be really bad at it. And I thought, not me. I'll probably be fine at it. He said it's a skill set just like any other. It needs to be practiced. And I heard him. But I don't think I really heard him, because my first interview with Goldman, I didn't get the job. And so after that, it was a real kind of shot to my ego. So I took every chance to interview at every place that I could for the next, I think I interviewed at 20, 30 spots. Jobs, some that I didn't want, selling life insurance and this and that, and just trying to get my interviewing skill set practiced. And so when I got called back to do an interview for a different role at Goldman, I knew the questions, I knew my answers, I knew the responses. I felt just so much more confident. So I guess one tip would be take any chance to interview you can get when you're an undergrad, and even after. I think it's a really, really helpful skill set to build.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that interviewing is something that is, if you need reps answering some of those questions. Tell me about a time where you had a strict deadline and how you made that deadline. Tell me about a time when you answering questions like that and being able to answer it succinctly, and is really just something that if you can pull that out without any preparation, good for you. But I feel like, the best way to answer those kind of like very specific technical questions that interviewers ask is definitely something that is worth practicing or that you need to practice.
Yeah. I had somebody from Fidelity who called me every week and we kind of practiced and worked on it. It was for a job that was in February. And so we just worked and worked and worked on it. So that was super, super helpful. But yeah, funny enough, when I went to law school, legal interviews are very, very different because they ask almost none of those questions. They tell me about a time when. It's more just they'll give you enough rope to hang yourself so you can talk, or they will talk the whole time because most attorneys like to talk and they will talk a lot. And so they are basically just trying to get a feel for you the whole time you're talking. So there's a lot less structure to legal interviews than there are finance management or business interviews. Is what I found is that legal interviews are actually quite a bit different in the sense that they're really trying to get more of a feel for you. I'm not saying which one is a better or worse style of interviewing, but they're definitely two very different styles.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I thought that legal interviews would kind of be a little bit more in a similar sphere. Like I didn't think that they would be like materially different from business.
I noticed a material difference. You'll maybe get one or two of those questions like that, or if it's maybe a bigger law firm that has a structured set of questions, you'll get questions like those. But in my experience, I got far less of those kind of the specific questions we were talking about. And it's more so you get to decide where the interview is going to go, what you're going to talk about, where you're going to focus on, what you're going to highlight, and basically build kind of that case for yourself. There's a lot more structure and free form in it in the interviews I've had.
And so you went to law school at Pepperdine. I think one of the big reasons why you chose that, if I remember correctly, was they give you a good scholarship. And it's a good school. It was kind of a combination of both of those things, right? Scholarship plus quality of education and network, and plus just like it's on the beach, right? Like the campus is pretty cool. But you seem to embrace the California lifestyle like pretty well, Curtis. Like you got like I understand you've picked up surfing. I don't know why I didn't bring this up at the start of the podcast, but you're living on a sailboat. Is currently where you are, which I'm pretty jealous of. And yeah, so that. I mean, I feel like all of that kind of like factored in your decision to go there, right?
Yeah, I don't know if the sailboat aspect.
Not yet. Yeah, that was yeah.
I definitely wanted to be in California. I think that was one of the reasons. And then I was able to get a really, really competitive scholarship that paid up for my tuition, so that made a big difference. And kind of taking a look at I had to look at opportunity cost for what is it going to cost me for to kind of take myself out of the job market for 3 years, and do I want to take on this debt load, and what does that kind of look like, and like so the kind of the best rank school I got into with the highest amount of money that I got was the calculus there.
Right. Which I think that seems like it seems like good calculus. That was actually the same reason Harrison, he's in graduate school right now, a master's in finance at the U, and he said the same thing. He was like the scholarship that I got and the quality edge of the both of those things is why he ended up going there. And so and then I guess so moving kind of like looking forward in your career. You ended up traveling a lot, and while you were traveling, I think maybe we can kind of like circle back to traveling at the end, because I think it's going to have a lot to do with kind of like what kind of like the advice that you have and kind of like looking back. But you came up with this idea for the founder's attorney, right? Yeah.
So a lot of it's kind of intertwined with a lot of the traveling and getting a little bit of space, but so I'd actually, when I was in law school, I'd never traveled at all before law school, and Pepperdine has a really, like a reputation for being a school where many of the undergrads, I think, end up doing some sort of study abroad program. But a lot of that translates into the law school as well. They had a London program where you go for a semester and you're taught by Pepperdine professors. They also had a program where you go to Uganda, so I signed up with both. It's really tricky to travel in undergrad when you're playing a sport. So I I was always a bit jealous of the kids who did travel. So when I got the chance to go, I said yes to it. I said yes to Uganda, and then on the back end of that to London. So I was going to be gone for 8 months. I kind of figured I'll be gone for these 8 months, and then I'll never need to leave the U.S. again. It was definitely wrong. I caught the travel bug pretty bad, and kind of fell in love with it. I've been to actually 30 countries now, and it's one of my favorite things to do is to travel. So that was informative in kind of starting my own firm. I came back to California, worked for Realty Mogul. They were kind of a Series D, Series E startup at that point in the equity crowdsourced funding space for real estate ventures. I worked underneath the general counsel and kind of learned a lot about how the actual practice within in-house role works. And then that summer, I moved up to Fresno, and that was Dowling Aaron that you mentioned. I worked for it was a medium-sized law firm, about 40 or 50 attorneys up in the Central Valley, and I worked there. Um, Amazing experience. Got to connect with the partners, really, really great folks. Learned a ton. Was able to interact with clients, and since I was the only summer intern there, I was able to get a lot of hands-on work in the areas that I really wanted to work in. Um, and I learned a lot about kind of the law firm model, how lawyers make money, how law firms make money, where there are some, in my mind at the time, and still some maybe unnecessary expenses. And so I figured the transition from leaving college to jumping into the adult world, I guess, was a jump, to say the least at the time, especially after 3 years. So I didn't want that to happen as much going from law school, where I really enjoyed and I was part of all of these activities and events and things, to kind of jumping into the legal world, to be quite so sudden. So that's why I did my last semester working kind of full time at the SEC and moved to DC. So my last semester of law school, I kind of moved away from all my friends, took a step back from bar review and all these committees and news orientation, all the things that I was a part of at Pepperdine, and moved to DC. And that gave me a little bit of perspective. And then one of my best friends wanted to study for the bar in the Caribbean. And since it was remote, we studied there. I said, yes, I'm in. He said, to Costa Rica. And I said, great. And he said, what about the Caribbean? I said, great. So we got Airbnb, and we did a program that was all online anyway. So we studied and worked and lived in the Caribbean for a couple months. We came back, took the bar, and then I left for about 4 or 5 months. I took the remainder of the loan I took out. I'm not sure I would advocate for this, but it worked out very well for me. I graduated debt-free, took around a $13,000, $12,000 loan to study for the bar, and then I spent the rest of it traveling for 5, 6 months after the bar. And during the time in the Caribbean and then after, I percolated and thought on this idea of starting my own firm. What does that look like? And I think passing the bar and doing something a little bit different, studying for the bar in the Caribbean and passing and having that kind of work out, and that was one piece of it. And I looked at this law firm model and I thought, there's a white space here, and my experience is strictly in startups and securities, and sort of struggle with this. And people don't need to pay me $1,000 an hour. They can pay me far less than that, but I can kind of fit in this niche and this white space of being hyper specialized and only helping early stage startups do their financing. So I came in with that kind of thesis and finding that white space, and was able to have kind of over the last 3 or 4, 5 years, been able to rise with the ecosystem and tide of startups in LA. It's just been growing and growing and growing. So I think I got lucky, and it was good timing with that, the amount of venture capital in LA growing and the interest in early stage startups growing.
And what in terms of VC, in terms of early stage startups, what do you kind of like see in LA? Is there kind of like a specialty, or do you see like a lot of like similar companies like propping up around the area? Or like what do you think are like some of like the like, what are your clients coming up with? Like, what do you feel like your clients are specializing in? Do you have like one thing that you focus on? in terms of like a business model? Is it like a fintech company, or is it like maybe it's like online dating? Maybe it's a product. Maybe they have a product that they're selling. And I mean, what do you feel like your clients are doing, and what do you kind of just speak a little bit about what the startup culture is like in LA?
Yeah, absolutely. So LA is always kind of reinventing and refining and changing itself. But I would say you asked this question 5, 10 years ago, you'd say the first answer you hear is consumer goods, consumer products, consumer tech is what's hot and what's cool, and what's coming out of LA is setting a trend in terms of like consumer tech. And an easy example to point to is Honey, if people are familiar with that, was acquired by PayPal recently in a multi-billion-dollar sale. So those I think have been Snapchat also another one out of the area. Those have been kind of the stalwarts of LA tech. But there's a lot going on. And because there's so many engineers coming out of USC, UCLA, and there's a lot of really great Harvey Mudd. There's a lot of great engineering programs in schools in LA. You're seeing a wide range. I mean, you're seeing some AI, you're seeing a lot of cryptocurrency, you're seeing definitely a lot of consumer goods, e-commerce type products, D2C, and seeing a lot of success in B2B SaaS companies, so business to business, selling software as a service companies. That's kind of one area that has been pretty successful in the last few years. Cannabis tech, that area is also kind of taken off. Green tech, yeah, those are all. LA dabbles a little bit. It's not the Silicon Valley, but there's it's a wider range of startups. But as far as like deep tech, you will see a lot, still a lot of B2B SaaS companies, but not in the same kind of quantity you'll see in the Valley, or and same with like AI companies. You see less med tech startups as well. Those are closer to San Diego, up in the Bay as well.
Yeah, well, that sounds like super interesting, dude. I love. I mean, I work for a private wealth management company, and so I love finance and like VC and like kind of investing in startups is something that I'm super interested in. You kind of mentioned earlier how we did like that internship together at Wayne Brown Institute, which was kind of like my first kind of experience working with. Working with entrepreneurs is like kind of fun, right? Like working with entrepreneurs is fun. It's cool seeing this idea that they have and that they're so passionate about, and trying to figure out a way to like make it work and take it to that next level. So I think that kind of like what you're doing and just kind of the idea of the founders attorney is like super cool.
There's less fintech. I love fintech as well, legal tech, same, but there is less fintech in kind of LA. There's Acorns, which I think is about an 8-year-old company. They're valued over $1 billion. They're down in Irvine, so a little bit south of here. You're actually the one that introduced me to Acorns, I think.
You have my Acorns account, man.
You were one of their first users. Yeah, I love Acorns. It's a great little product.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all the robo-advisors, I think, are like super disruptive and interesting. Betterment, Wealthfront, Acorns are all super cool. And so I guess I wanted to ask you, looking back over your career, over the things, all the things that you've done, can you point to like maybe one thing that you're like is founding your firm, like, is that what you're like most proud of, or what do you think you're like, what are you most proud of that you've done so far in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think the firm still kind of shocks me that it works, and that I had this thesis that I could work. Like my idea was to I work 20 hours a week and focus 20, 30, 40 hours a week on other things. And I think the thing that surprised me the most is that it actually works, and I have like very happy clients and people, and I get to work with amazing entrepreneurs, and that it's going the way it's going, and I get to work within these early stage tech deals and kind of get to be plugged into the LA ecosystem. I think that's one that I'm really proud of. I teach at Pepperdine, as I think you mentioned. I'm teaching my 5th class right now, Biz Orgs. I just got my reviews back from the last one, and incredibly positive. So I was really, really happy to see the last kind of set of reviews that I got. I think I got 10 students that did a review out of like the 20 or 25 I had in my class. And it was just awesome to kind of get that kind of feedback from students. So I love teaching. That's one thing I'm really passionate about. But I think it's definitely the founders attorney still kind of surprised me, and I think I'm just really happy that it's created the space to do a lot of work, to do a lot of self work, to kind of build a foundation for what is the next 20, 30 years of my career look like. And so it's given me an opportunity that I don't think that all of us get in our careers, because we end up scrambling, working, and just going. And I experienced that at Goldman. I was working 11, 12-hour days. So you're just in a scramble, and you don't really have, I guess, the self-reflection to see where you want your career to go and to build some of those foundational skill sets that are going to carry you forward from this point through your 40s, 50s, 60s, and what does that look like, and how do you build upon and capitalize on that continuing holistically. That's the piece that I'm the most proud of, and I've really only seen a lot of that stuff come together in the last 6, 7, 12 months, which has been really, really great to kind of watch.
That kind of like just what you were saying about, you know, kind of having the time to reflect and having the time to kind of like think about strategically, what do I really want? How can I execute on this? I feel like, you know, some of that is, and I'm kind of like leading here because I feel like I know the answer, but like who are some of the people that, not necessarily like your parents but like, you know, it could be like podcasts or books or business book people or whoever, like who do you think have like a really big impact on how you think about your career, and what do you feel like they've like taught you?
Yeah. So in terms of, I think maybe you're leaning into Tim Ferriss. I read that book. Read that book in Spain on my travel in that gap after law school, before I got bar results back and before I started the firm. I was like, I can do this. I think I can do this. And you get jacked up for the idea of like mini retirements and living kind of your ideal life, and what does that look like? And in hindsight, there's some aspects of that maybe there's some fluff, and I think critics are right to argue some of those aspects. But he's right to point out a lot of these interesting things that you're not taught in a traditional sense, and he's not the one to come up with them. But a lot of it's kind of getting plugged into that, like that financially independent, retire early idea, and hearing some of these different thoughts that you don't necessarily hear in a high school or an undergrad, or even a graduate school. You don't hear kind of breaking the mold a little bit. But yeah, a lot of people have had a lot of impact on me. And in terms of like authors, definitely, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, like being more present, being more like grounded, and like being in every single moment. That was a big, like, I read those two around the same time, and both of them had a really, really big impact on me.
Say the name of the second one again.
It's called The Power of Now.
The Power of Now.
Yeah.
Because I haven't finished the 4-Hour Work Week. I started listening to it when Amy and I bought this house. You know, this past year, you can tell we kind of bought a fixer-upper. We still got some more stuff to do. This office is kind of the last place that needs some love, you know, in the house. But I remember painting cabinets in our kitchen, listening to the 4-Hour Work Week, and Tim Ferriss talking about living the life you want and why waiting until you retire. And yeah. I think that's one of the things that, you know, if and I don't want to necessarily speak for you, but for anybody that listens to this podcast, you know, who is currently in business school or whatever, I think it's important for them to understand that, you know, going and killing yourself at an investment bank for, you know, 80, 90 hours a week. That is a great way, you know, that is a great way to make a living, and you're probably going to have a happy life. But I think there are other ways to live a fulfilling life and to be happy with your career and your wealth, and get to do like all the things that you want to do. That's one of the things that I appreciate, I think, so much about where I work right now at Albion. And I guess, that's one of the things that I appreciate so much about working at Albion right now, is I feel like it's a company where they take the whole work-life balance thing seriously, and they totally advocate or are big on us exploring what we want to do within the company, and in terms of whether we want to be more client facing, whether we want to be work more on the research side, or whether we want to kind of work on the back end. They're very supportive of people exploring different parts of the company. And I think in general, when you have a better work-life balance, it gives you a chance or an opportunity to reflect on what's really important to you, versus when you're just freaking grinding and you don't have any time to think. I felt that way when I was working at Morgan Stanley sometimes, or even sometimes, now when I feel like I'm really busy. We just went through a big data conversion project where I've been kind of a little bit busier lately, where you feel like it's every day is the same sometimes. It's like Groundhog Day, and you don't have any time to think strategically about what you're really doing with your life. You just wake up, you grind, you eat, you sleep, and you do it the next day. And I think that's what's something super cool about the way that you've approached your career. Is I feel like you've put that thought into it, and you set it up so that you can continue to grow and think about that. And so I think that's super cool.
Thank you. And I agree. I think having that time is super important, because otherwise you can't see kind of the forest through the trees, and you just get so wrapped up in tree, and
Right.
the older you get, the faster it goes. It just keeps going. I think that's one that if somebody told me that when I was in high school or undergrad, I don't think that would have resonated so much, is that it goes faster and faster. But yeah, you get into a rhythm and a routine, and it just keeps clicking by, and you can see that like 3, 4, 5, 8 years, a decade just melts away. So it's important to you can't think strategically all the time. You actually have to put in the work as well. But it's important to have that opportunity to zoom out. And when you do have the opportunity, to really utilize it, to take that opportunity to get a wider perspective and a wider view, and see, where am I going, and is this where I want to go? And I think this is where people talk about mentors all the time. And I think that we get, same with networking, I think these words get overwhelming, because you go, how am I going to find a mentor? How am I going to find this perfect person whose life I want? And with networking, you go, it's intimidating. How do I go talk to these people and make business happen? And I like to look at both of those things very, very differently, in the sense that with a mentor, it doesn't necessarily need to be somebody who has your ideal life. It just bits and pieces that you really respect of that person, and what their business is, or how they treat other people, or what an aspect of their life that you want to emulate, and kind of getting that realer, truer perspective on it. And you can get that from a lot of people. It doesn't necessarily, you find one person who is the ideal mentor. That's incredible. It's fantastic. But even if it's 60 or 70 or 80% fit, or 30% fit in an area that you really care about, I think that's where you can take something away from it. And realizing also, as a mentee, you have a lot to give as well, in the sense of you're more plugged into what's happening right now on the ground, maybe within your age group or demographic, or you're more plugged into early tech, or this or that, or what's cool, or what's happening. And also, people who are mentoring want to be able to give something back, and so you can be a student of them. You can keep that person who's acting as kind of a mentor plugged into your journey. They're bought into your storyline, and they're able to help out, and they can check in and see, and think, and that they and really truly have kind of an impact on your journey and your story and where you're going. So I think that that the mentor-mentee relationship can feel a little bit one-sided if you're not looking at it a little bit more holistically, and it can also feel really intimidating. So it's one I really, because I've had tons of mentors who I don't know if they would directly say, oh yeah, we have a mentor-mentee relationship, but in hindsight, looking back, it's like, oh, absolutely, they acted as a real mentor to me.
I think that's I'm pretty sure it was like Simon Sinek who said that he was talking about a mentor-mentee relationship that he had, where he was the mentee, and he said the exact same thing, that there was never a formal, hey, will you be my mentor? It was kind of just like he was just saying that a mentor-mentee relationship evolves like any relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that happens over time. And he just found himself going to this person consistently for advice, for help, for company, just, for friendship, essentially friendship, even though this person was his senior. And then he talked about how at one point his mentor said the same thing to him, just that he felt like he was getting as much out of the relationship being Simon Sinek's mentor that Simon Sinek was getting out of being this guy's mentee.
Imagine being plugged into Simon Sinek's journey, right? And being out and saying that how much this mentor, this person meant in Simon Sinek's life, like somebody who's a world-renowned author, incredibly famous, incredibly like great writer, great storyteller, and like being plugged into Simon Sinek's journey, right? That's like what every mentor, I mean, that's what we all like want in a sense. If you're really being a teacher and trying to give back, is that it's great to see somebody who really appreciated and took his advice, right? And then went a step further on it, which is incredible.
Right. And well, I know, I'm usually kind of like trying to keep these shows about, 30, 40 minutes. And so I wanted to maybe kind of just like kind of pivot towards the end of the show, where I kind of just want to ask you for, or if you were going to give yourself some advice, or if you were going to think about, somebody who's in college and is trying to, make a decision about what they want to do or their career. What do you think you would say to that person? What do you think you would tell them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I would go back a little bit to the forest and trees thing, is that when you're in college, it feels so prescient that this first job is so important, and that if you don't get this, it's not going to end up being like you want it to be. One thing that I would say is taking some time to know yourself, and this is where it gets back to like that strategic thinking. So taking some time to know yourself and know where you're going, and I think it really comes back to trusting yourself to follow kind of your journey, where you want it to go, and trusting that you've connected enough with yourself to know where that is. Another one is don't get so caught up in what other people think you should be doing. Like that's one that still need to remind myself, and we all, I think, need that reminder, is living your own journey and living your own life, because at the end of it, like no one else is going to be like, you're the one that can make yourself happy in this, and it's not like you living somebody else's journey is definitely not going to make you happy. And so I think living your own journey, and allowing it to unfold instead of trying to control it, which I think a lot of people do, and I know that I'm guilty of this as well, is trying to control every aspect of this journey that we're on. Kind of watching and allowing your career to unfold. You have to be an active participant in it, but instead of trying to control exactly where it's going to go, I think you really stifle some of that growth when you try to control every aspect of every career rung you step up. I think it's will mesh better with you, and it'll align more with yourself and with your goals, and maybe it won't hit exactly what you had in this picture in your head because somebody else put that picture in your head, or this is what you think other people would want you to do, but allowing it to kind of unfold. I mean, there's a lot of things that I never would have seen myself living on a boat, and it's absolutely fantastic. I love it. And me letting go of some of the control in my life has allowed for growth in some areas that I don't think that I would have seen otherwise.
So I think that's good advice. That's kind of similar to my friend's advice that I interviewed, David Clark, and he said his advice was kind of to just try to be flexible. Try to be flexible and be nimble, and kind of like embrace change if it's presented to you. Like try not to be so rigid about what you feel like you have to do, and if you feel like something is a good opportunity, you should be flexible. Was kind of like his advice. So I feel like that's kind of similar. Well, I wanted to talk to you about like traveling now. So you've traveled. Where have you traveled? So you said you've been to 30 countries. You've done a big trip in kind of like Southeast Asia, and kind of moving to more Central Asia, right? And you've done a big trip to Europe. You were in Uganda, so you've spent some time in Africa. Maybe just talk a little bit about like kind of like your different travels and what like some of your highlights have been.
Yeah, sure. So the big pieces, I guess the big rocks, the place that I spent a lot of time in, spent a couple months in the Caribbean. Like I said, spent 6 months in London. Love London. Scotland. Edinburgh was definitely, I've always recommended that as a top city to go to if you're looking to like travel. Africa was amazing. I've been trying to get back there for years now, and would love to get back to Africa. People are just so living with like a really open heart. Same in Southeast Asia. That's what I found was just like like we kind of get insular and shut in the U.S. and protecting what's ours and scared and just watching people live, I guess, a little bit more just hands open and heart open was really, really a cool and impactful thing for me. I spent, I think, 2 months in Vietnam. I bought a motorcycle and went north to south.
Yeah.
And a bit of.
And I don't think you actually didn't know how to ride a motorcycle when you bought it, right? Yeah, you had no idea how to ride a motorcycle. You're in Vietnam, and you're like, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah, I got a lesson the day I bought it, but yeah. And I didn't know how to sail the sailboat when I bought it either.
Yeah.
That was crazy. And I usually go out like every weekend now. Yeah, I guess in terms of like some of my top favorite places, I was actually just talking with a friend about this day. I went to Morocco recently. That was my last trip, I guess, before the pandemic hit. I was just saying how much I like traveling through a little bit unconventional or little hidden in plain sight means. We took a ferry across the Cape of Good Hope and things that I may have it wrong, through the Horn of Africa, right to from the bottom of Spain to Morocco, and a fantastic trip. Really, really enjoyed Chefchaouen. I would say Budapest is one of my top cities. Incredible place if you get a chance to get out there. It's a little bit tricky talking about traveling and all these places that are incredible that you can't go to right now, and that their character may have changed. I mean, you look at LA and the character of it's changed a little bit, and it'll come back, and things will look very similar. But yeah, I would, for anybody out there who's contemplating, who's a curious mind, and is I think that's what traveling is like enabled for me, is just to see all these different people doing all these things that are doing them differently and realizing it's not better or worse. Some things are better, maybe some things are worse, but realizing it's just a lot of it's just different, and it's different, and that's okay. And that variety adds to this specialness in life.
One of the other people that I interviewed, her name was Leslie Summerdorf. She's an executive chef at Harmon's. She her big thing is like traveling too. That's kind of like her key to living her advice to like living a well-rounded life is to travel.
Yeah, I agree.
And which is something that I need to be better at. I've only been to Canada, never been to Mexico, and Amy and I have our first trip planned to Europe in the summer of 2022. So I'm really excited about that.
Dos Santos too. It's north of Cabo a little bit. It's like an hour away from Cabo. It's really fantastic. I've been down through Baja a couple times just driving south. I flew into Cabo and rented a car and drove up. It's awesome. That's a really, really great getaway too. It's a really unique and fun. Is a place I'm trying to get back to. Is Baja California.
Baja California.
Yeah, there's a lot of great places in the States and in Canada, like Banff. That's a place that's on my list in Canada. Yeah. I know it's hard talking about it right now with everything going on, but we'll get back to it.
We'll get back to it, and hopefully we can travel together somewhere. I would love to do. I'd love to go to Banff. Actually, Banff is on my list too. I'll email you some stuff. Maybe we can plan something. I would love to do that. Well, Curtis, thank you. I feel like that was a great show and super productive. And thank you so much for coming on. I'll let you know when I post it, man. I'll let you know. I think probably in a few weeks.
And if anybody has any additional follow-up questions and they reach out to you, feel free to give my contact information. I'm happy to mentor
yeah.
and I'm always happy to kind of give my 2 cents and help out a little bit. So I hope people found this helpful.
I'm sure they did. Well, thanks for joining me, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Your Hot with Scott. This is my guy Curtis Roberts, the founder at the Founders Attorney. Thanks for tuning in this week. We'll see you next time.
Big thank you to my friend Curtis Roberts for coming on the show. We had a great conversation about his business school journey to law school to starting his own law firm, the importance of reps and interviewing in the startup culture scene in Los Angeles. We talked about the importance of taking a step back and thinking strategically about your career and the mentor-mentee relationship's importance. Curtis's advice for young people is to try and see the forest through the trees and to experience other parts of the world as much as possible. If you want to reach out to Curtis, please check out his website, foundersattorney.com. I'll be posting his other contact information in the description to this podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode of Digital Mentorship. Make sure to press that subscribe button, and we'll see you guys next time.